Welcome back. This is episode 3 of the Methodical Muse podcast, and it is me, Christine Curtis, your Methodical Muse. This week, we're going to talk about something, an epiphany I had. I was once a prominent plant lady, and other than the flowers that I get weekly now, there's just one plant left. But I had this moment as they were fading, a realization that I want to share with you. Episode 3, right seed, wrong soil. So, for a few years, like I just shared, I was a plant mom. I had a pothos, I had an aloe plant, I had at one point in time a rubber plant. I had a number of different ones, a lemon cypress, you name it, it was in my windowsill. But it wasn't until I began to notice that after repotting 3 of the plants, I had an infestation of gnats. There's a few things I just can't do. One of them is insects, critters of sorts. And normally gnats are acceptable when they are minimal. But when I say an infestation, they were everywhere, to the point I took a mouse trap, one of the traps that have that, nasty peanut butter aroma on them, and laid it flat near the plants. I did this for a few hours. By the time I came back, the entire trap was covered in gnats. Of course, gnats are prone to follow aromas that are sweet, which is why apple cider vinegar gets them. But I knew I had a problem once I saw that. So I was left with 2 options. Do I deal with the gnats and keep my babies and try to repot all of the plants again? Or do I say goodbye? And to put this into context, I've had all of the plants since they were this big. And at the time of this revelation, they were all huge. The aloe plant itself was about this wide. It's this high. It's sprouting over. I attempted to even replant them and allow them to sprout in other pots, trim them. I've had them for years. So I couldn't figure out what transition, but I realized it was the soil. Because no matter what you plant, if you plant it in bad soil, it will rot. So I parted ways with the plants. Realizing in that season, I was also parting with things and people that I had linked to my identity for years. But what you gonna do? Because when it's time to change the soil, it's time. Okay? And there have been seasons when I felt like there have been some decay for some time. Like friendships, jobs, environments that no longer served me in the same way. I remember before my current position when I had the revelation that I had outgrown the role I was in. I had the language to say it, and I knew I had to pivot because I had earned my master's. And I even applied for a position I didn't really want, but I knew that that was the only way to get me out of my own way. And sometimes your growth looks uncomfortable. Sometimes your spirit starts whispering what once felt right no longer feels good. And if you ignore that whisper, eventually life will push you and repot you anyway. Worry tea. So let's talk about the right seed, wrong soil. In order to have this kind of revelation, this moment of clarity, there requires some introspection, right? You got to inspect the soil. And before you start blaming yourself for the lack of growth, check what's underneath of your surface. Is it exhaustion? Is it isolation? Is it misalignment? Sometimes it isn't you. Sometimes it's just where you're planted. And secondly, once you have done that, recognize that sometimes beauty is the distraction. What do I mean when I say that? All of my plants looked like they were thriving. The aloe plant was still producing volumes of arms full of aloe. The rubber plant continued to sprout to the point where I had to continue to cut it down almost bi-weekly. My pothos had gotten so huge that every month I had to trim it and try to propagate it. So on the surface, all the plants looked like they were thriving. But I don't want you to confuse what looks good for it being good. Because if you're trying to assess that after you've inspected the soil and you've recognized that maybe just because the appearance says all is well and it isn't well, you may get to a point where you have to replant. You may have to start over. You may have to make a decision that changes perspective, position, and the things around you. I'm going to encourage you to do so and do it without guilt. I think considering where I was in life, I struggled with the idea that I had to let go of these plants that I had had for an immense amount of time. I was cutting off a life form from me, and I was not prepared for it. Because in my mind, I felt they looked good. I can save this. But I need you to remember, sometimes transplanting yourself into a new environment isn't failure, it's faith. You're trusting that what's inside you deserves a richer soil in order to thrive. And every uprooting may carry a sense of or an form of grief, but it also carries some guidance, because it shows that you still have life, and what has been a part of it may have just run its course, and that's okay too. I want you to appreciate the detachment. It doesn't mean disinterest. Sometimes it very well simply means discernment. You've allowed yourself to be guided in such a way that on the outside it looks abnormal, but to your spirit and your soul, it's everything you needed that you never knew. And I want you to also honor what blooms out of the replanting. You know, survivor's guilt is a very real thing. Sometimes we feel sorrowful for the things we've left behind. But it's these very things that were creating detriments in our lives that we have to release. And that's the balance, right? The let go and the letting God. So maybe this is where you pause and you ask yourself, do I need to replant my soil? Do I need to change my soil? Have I mistaken comfort for nourishment? And if so, it's not failure. It's a setup for something greater. Because growth requires release. What's no longer feeding you isn't meant to finish you. So when your roots feel a little crowded, don't fight for space. Find some new soil. And if this season feels like it's uprooting, then trust that something deeper and greater is being pruned in you. Honor the seed and the soil, because every season knows when to bloom and when to uproot. My hope is that you trust the repotting. So, stay methodical, stay magical, and don't you ever forget that the only thing that lasts are the beautiful lessons. Until next time, guys.